My name is Kay. This is Janusz alongside me, as always, with you on a Tuesday, but we're also with you on a Wednesday and a Friday as well. It's a revolving cast. We always touch on the biggest topics from the football world and preview a lot what's coming up. Obviously, a big talk at the moment is the Premier League title race. That's where we're going to be starting today. And then with the Champions League hitting the calendar once again, we'll get Janusz's take on the ties that we've got coming up. Some big ties too to be getting our teeth into. But let's start with the Premier League title race right now, Janusz. Boy, is it close. Arsenal and Liverpool both tied in first and second, respectively, on 71 points, 1 point behind them. In third is Manchester City on 70 points. Now, it wasn't too long ago that you did pick Liverpool this time around as your favourites to go all the way and do it this season. Has that changed, or are you sticking with them?
Well, it has to change. There's a bit of a blink, although, I mean, Liverpool are very much in it as well. I mean, we can say all we want about them dropping points against Manchester United, but I think just the fact that they came back in it keeps Liverpool in the title hunt. We forget that it's still a point away at Old Trafford, but there is a blink. I think there's a little bit of a momentum that's lost in all of that, and because it's a three-team race, I just don't feel as good about this Liverpool team at the moment as I do about the other teams, in particular Manchester City.
So what changed with Liverpool for you, like specifically? Because it was only a month ago that you were going with them. And I know it's close even in your own head, but you did pick them.
Right. I mean, I guess we can kind of tie that into, some of the points that, what it's going to take for each team, or what are the worries is that, I just felt that, they're just lacking that ruthlessness, and maybe some of the key players maybe, I look at somebody like Mo Salah. Obviously, there's been some injuries. He hasn't had the run of games that he normally does have. But when you look at the game against Manchester United, he just didn't play well. I'm not talking about missing one or two very good chances that you expect him to put away, but he wasn't at his best. And when he isn't, obviously Liverpool loses, 25-30% of their might, if you will. So I just, looking at the schedule, it's not easy. And because the bar is so high right now, I just think that it's going to be a little bit more difficult than it was a month ago.
So they're your concerns for Liverpool. That's what obviously we're going to get into with each of the teams. If we're to ask you your concerns for Arsenal, you know what? I'm going to wait for Arsenal. Tell me what your concerns with Man City are.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Tell me what your concerns for Man City are, where they might encounter some problems.
Well, for Manchester City is obviously, this is not the team from last year. They're not firing on all cylinders. Not to say that they're not very good, but they were spectacular last season. I mean, nobody could touch them, I feel. And they've proven that, winning every trophy there was to be won, just about, right? So they're getting there. Remember, last season at this stage, or long ago, we absolutely knew what their starting 11 was, and we were very, very comfortable. We can talk about depth and rotation, and they've been doing a great job at that, just as Arsenal have and Liverpool. But last season, when it came to the biggest matches, you absolutely knew who that was going to be. This year, it's a little bit different, although they're getting there. So that's why, to me, they're the favorites, because I see Jack Grealish, who's slowly coming back to his best form right now. You can now see Bernardo Silva once again, perhaps being on that right-hand side, or maybe next to Rodri, I suppose. The big issue still is, Phil Foden. Should he be playing number 10? Should he be playing over De Bruyne? I don't think that's an issue. At least it isn't for me. Play both of them as number 10s, which I think we're going to see again. And that's when you're going to see maybe Manchester City pulling ahead of everybody. But there's some questions, not to mention, a situation in the back because of injuries. So they're not as solid as they were last year. So there are some concerns, and perhaps that's why we have such a close race.
We do, but you've just said for you they're the favourites now, so it's not that much of a concern as it would be with the other two teams for you right now.
No, not as much. You're talking Arsenal. I think it's very, very close when it comes down to the favorites. Look, logic to me is everything, and when I look at the schedule, and I look at what Arsenal and Liverpool in particular have to go through, and I look at Manchester City, who are just, in my opinion, coming back maybe to their best because of the quality and depth of squad. I just think that they're going to run out the schedule, and it's going to be close. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, because I think Arsenal, if they win it, are going to be absolutely worthy champions.
So Arsenal, what would your concerns be for them? Because I've heard you say before, Janusz, that you find it difficult to poke holes in this Arsenal side. So can you find any concerns for them? There must be some if you're picking City ahead of them, even if it is just.
Well, you have to learn how to be champions, right? I mean, that's what they've been doing it. Last year, people said that they choked. I think it's absolutely crazy, as I just mentioned before. This was the best Manchester City ever. So I don't see how you choke against a team like that just because you were playing them close and for long periods of time you were at the top of the table. I think it's absolutely crazy when you talk about progress. When you talk about anything else, I mean, look, you can't poke a hole at Arsenal. There just isn't. They're the best. They're top of the league. They're the best team defensively. They're the best team on the attack. They're the best team on set pieces in the Premier League. I think they may be the best team on set pieces in Europe. I didn't check that, but I bet you they're very close, if not the best. They have the experience of last season, and yet they may not win it because the best teams sometimes don't win that. And we've seen that with Liverpool in that season when it was 98, 97 points. I mean, Liverpool could have easily have won it, but they didn't. So, that it's just the nature of that you have to take advantage of the situation. And right now, the schedule doesn't favor Arsenal.
The schedule ahead is, I'm going to read it out because I want to see where you're saying the problem could be, because you're still saying that you find it very difficult to poke holes with this Arsenal side, which really should make them your favourites, yet they're not. And obviously, I know that Manchester City have already won and they've got that about them. So let's go through the schedule and you can stop me when you think there's a concern for them here. So the Champions League.
I can stop you right now if you like.
Okay, go on.
I don't like to. Yeah, it's the North London derby. I think Arsenal will beat Chelsea. That's obviously a game, even though Chelsea are nowhere near their best. That's why I think Arsenal will win it, and that game's going to be emotional. And you're going to have to throw out. We saw what Liverpool and Manchester United have done. Manchester United and Chelsea are very much the same, without identity. You don't know what you're going to get from them from week to week. It's going to be special. It's a London derby, but I think Arsenal will win that game. And then there's going to be that game against Spurs, who have themselves a lot to play for, and that's where emotions, sometimes take over. If Arsenal beat Chelsea and Spurs, then Arsenal will be champions.
So it's those two London derbies. The Arsenal against Chelsea and then the North London derby, they're your biggest concern. That could be potential stumbling block there.
Well, of course. I mean, you can always mention, the Champions League, but I think for Manchester City, it's not going to be any easier. So that levels or equals itself out just a little bit, right? Manchester City facing Real Madrid, but you have to look into things like that. If you want to get more technical, it's obviously, there's a way of stopping Arsenal, just like there's a way, I suppose, to stop everyone. But
so there is a hole to be poked.
Yes, Porto has shown that. There's been times in the Premier League that if you stop the combination between Martin Odegaard and Saka, this is not the same team, because I suppose if I had to go somewhere, I don't want to say that Arsenal are one-dimensional, but there certainly isn't a clear plan B when that little combination, when the wide games does not work for Arsenal, which Porto really, really exposed, by the way, in both legs. Of course, they didn't go through, but I'm sure everybody has watched that. And, if you play high, if you make Saka and Martinelli or Trossard or whoever else is on that side, Gabriel Jesus, if you make them defend, if you take away what they enjoy the most, which is attack, then you can get through Arsenal.
Because they drew with Chelsea in October, they drew with Spurs in September when it comes to Premier League play. So obviously that's your concern there. It feels like your belief is strong in them, but then I hear you saying this. So how strong is your belief in Arsenal doing it? Because you say you still wouldn't be surprised if they did go on and do it.
It's big, as I've said to you, Kay. I think I look at this Arsenal team and they have done everything possible to be champions. But again, it's so difficult when you face somebody that has the know-how, has won it so many times in the last decade, has won it very, very close, and you're presented with that schedule, right? I mean, last year, as I've said, you can't fault Arsenal. You can't call it a choke because it wasn't even close. I think we all knew that this was going to happen. They lost all their games against Arsenal last season. Remember, it was kind of weird because I think that the first leg happened in the new year, right? They had to wait to face Manchester City and prove that they're worthy. This year it's a little bit different. They've beaten them. They drew the game away to Manchester City. Arsenal have done extremely well against the top teams, but I think if you ever going to say they choked, then they would have done it against Fulham, West Ham, Villa, and Newcastle, and that was November, December. It's kind of hard to say that you choked that early in the season because the season hasn't even developed itself back then. So here we are. They're doing absolutely everything, to be in a position to win that, and they're in that position. That's why I'm so conflicted. That's why it's so difficult, because as bad as that season is, look what they have done recently on both sides of the ball, just absolutely flying right now. So there's that possibility, because who's to say that they're not going to get through that schedule? But you have to go with logic. I'm not big on bookies, but I'm sure there isn't one that has given Arsenal as favorites. Is there? Maybe there is. I don't know.
Well, the last time I looked, but that was last week, and obviously it's changing all the time, and it's changed over the weekend, I'm sure. Whereas Liverpool were favourites, Manchester City were second favourites, even though they were third in the table, and Arsenal were then third favourites. But obviously, different odds at different times. Can you just elaborate on what you mean when you say they're one-dimensional?
Well, as I've said, I mean, the wide game is prevalent for them, and they have to be absolutely spot on. Especially on the right hand side. If you look at Odegaard, I mean, his combination play and the enjoyment of playing with Saka, it's much bigger than if Martinelli plays or Gabriel Jesus or Trossard. And some teams can read that. You have to be consistent. I think you look at Martin Odegaard, who I think is probably the best pure playmaker in the Premier League right now. I can't think of anybody else really. And he's a little bit different. Some teams in the Premier League don't necessarily have that sort of a player, right? A little bit old school in a way. But as I've said, I mean, if you pin Saka and Martinelli, I'm assuming that he's going to be back and playing, or Gabriel Jesus, who is not a natural wide player, then I think you can have success. And then after that, it becomes a little bit more difficult, because there isn't this, even though Kai Havertz is playing, finally showing his quality. Do I think that Kai Havertz is going to be delivering these sort of goals in the right moments for the rest of the season? That's doubtful. It's possible, but then you say to yourself, yes, can they grind through the games because they're so good defensively and still withstand, say, if Saka and Odegaard or the wide game isn't at their best? Possible, but I just don't think that they have the variety of play that, say, Manchester City for sure have, and even Liverpool to a degree, if and when they get everybody back, because that's certainly when you talk about Liverpool and their concerns is that the lack of being ruthless, right? I mean, if Diogo Jota comes in, that gives you a different dimension. Obviously, not having Trent takes away from the way you play the game as well. But in terms of Arsenal, I've always felt that so much depends on Martin Odegaard and the wide game.
So if there are pillars and fundamentals when it comes to being a champion, and we say, you have to have, say, these 4 components, one of them is to not be one-dimensional. Would that be a
Well, you have to have a balance, right? You have to have a different way of winning it. And by the way, I'm not saying that Arsenal doesn't have it, because they can't, they have an identity. I like teams that, that do go out there and attack and take risks. And that's everything that Arsenal does do. As I've said, over the years, even when they were bad, they have never, ever lost their identity. What's changed right now, that we can no longer go to what we used to go to and say that they're soft. We no longer talk about Patrick Vieira, do we? Right? No longer talk about, Tony Adams or, needing the central defenders. They have all of that. And with everything else, even if, because, I've been saying that Porto have figured out a way. Well, in a way they didn't, right? I mean, they showed a blueprint that it's possible. They made it very difficult winning that game, but they didn't get through. So in a way, Arsenal did find ways, and I think that's possible. But I think there's going to be games that are left in the schedule when emotions come in and maybe things don't go your way. That's I mean, just simple as that. You look at Manchester City and that know-how, that experience of a very, very close title races, the experience of winning everything. This is where you have to kind of give the nod to Manchester City if you just lose logic. But, our game isn't logical. So I'm perfectly fine if I'm wrong with this. And as I've said, if Arsenal see it through, absolutely deserves. I mean, in fact, I think so far they have, for me, been the best team in the Premier League on both sides of the ball. And the table shows that, by the way.
Right. So what's your percentage chance that they win it, Arsenal?
If I just go between two teams, because I don't want to get in the weeds because that's going to be boring for a listener. But, I give, 45 to 55.
Okay. 45 to 55. So then maybe they would be your favourites.
No, I mean, I'm giving 55 to Manchester City.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So you're splitting that between them. I thought you were saying between 45 and 55%. I'm like, well, that's quite a big ballpark there that we're looking at. All right. Well.